Hey, I'm an innovator.
Hello, I am a conventionalist.
I start my day reading trends reports. I build my events around real-time audience needs, and I'm not afraid to try bold new formats.
I start my day by reviewing last year's post-event summary, and I build my events based on what's worked in the past.
I cancel stale initiatives. I experiment. I work under a leader who actually rewards me for taking risks.
I defend every line item. I stick to what's safe, and my boss still reminds me about the few times I tried innovative new things that failed.
People call me cutting edge.
People call me stable.
Well, exactly. You conventionalists are playing it safe, aren't you?
We are, while you innovators are pulling ahead to win.
And scene.
So thank you very much for indulging us in that little bit of role playing. So do you guys remember those commercials that I'm a PC, I'm a Mac? I told Ken I wanted to do a little spoof of that to introduce the concept we're going to be discussing today, and he reluctantly agreed. Those of you who know Ken probably are not surprised that he would only do it if he got to be the Mac or the innovator in this case. So thank you for indulging me in that.
Yeah, I mean, we knew it would be this way. So it's a pretty accurate metaphor, though, that illustrates some of the different mindsets that we're dealing with. And our research teams have uncovered some research we're going to share today that shows that really there are two kinds of event organizers. And through the conversations we've heard today and talking about uncertainty, et cetera, we're going to wrap up a little bit of that. But as we think about innovation, as we think about moving things forward, as we think about the things that are needed to face the headwinds and the uncertainty, I really think there's a lot we can learn from understanding who these personas are and how we can work around them. As we looked and talked about this with show organizers, we found that there was this subset of respondents in our data, and we didn't go out to seek it. We started to see it emerge as we began to cull through the information, and they answered things differently. And in follow-up and in continuing to have conversations with them, they continued to drive some different patterns. And so we're going to go through some things that will kind of focus on what that looks like. And so we have a profile of who the innovators are. It probably wouldn't surprise you that our little skit was based on most of this, so I won't repeat all of it. But one of the things that I find most fascinating, and we've really begun to explore and dig into and even design product around in our research and marketing and growth efforts as an organization, and that is talking to these innovators. They focus not on who is there and that constant cycle of Yelp review that we get into with our events, but really who's not coming, who used to come, who used to participate, who used to exhibit and is not. We do an assessment we call a community needs assessment that begins to look at that information, at that data, and helps us understand how they are driving things forward so that we can optimize all of our events across portfolios and advise our partners. So as we looked at the data, you wouldn't be surprised by some of this, but the majority of events, over 2/3, actually were not making the kinds of changes. They're not evolving. They said, when asked, are they going to evolve the program? They said, probably not. That seems to be a problem. But this 27% that we began to identify really told us some things about this group. And as we begin to dig in, they are focused on generations, they are focused on trends, they are focused on the things that we talked about. We also asked them if they're going to change, should it be based on audience needs? And in having a conversation with focus groups, we actually got some emotional responses back, and we'll talk about those in a second. But in this group, we saw that these innovators really wanted to focus on dramatic change and evolving at a pace that was really rapid. And it's fascinating because most of us do events once a year. And so the pace of innovation in our industry can be stunted by that conversation and stunted by the lack of constant iteration. And we've got to figure out some ways and some cycles how to get in front of that. But we're talking to leaders. All of you here lead teams. And so as we talk to you, you might say, well, I'm an innovator, or I'm a conventionalist and I'm bringing up innovators. Maybe that's the case, and that's great as well. We found that this was the key for these innovators. And in fact, in our focus groups, they became almost emotional in this response. We said, do you feel empowered to do those things? You see the generational shifts, you understand what's happening, and yet you're not evolving your events. Why? And they said we aren't empowered. About half feel empowered or somewhat empowered, but in person in focus groups, overwhelmingly, even emotionally, some with tears, I don't feel empowered. And as I move forward, I need to feel empowered. And so we've set out on a journey to empower using research, insights, facts, collaboration, and community to come together around how we begin to empower this audience, these opportunities, and using the data to inform that conversation.
Okay, so I want to take just a moment to sort of summarize what the data that Ken presented reveals to us. And essentially that is, there is a fundamental mindset divide among show organizers. And the divide isn't just impacting our show features or our marketing tactics, but that divide is impacting, it's showing up in the way that we plan, in the way that we prioritize, in the way that we budget, and in the way that we react to the changes that are happening in the world around us. So if we can kind of look at this to see the difference of these two groups side by side. The innovators that are on the left, they are the ones that are experimenting with new formats. They're the ones that are staying relentlessly focused on the needs of their audiences, and they're making bold, data-informed decisions. The conventionalists, they are the ones that are staying the course, they're playing it safe, and they are making small incremental changes, but really only when the pressure builds. And the reality is, what column do you think most of our industry is operating in? It's the conventionalists, but the data is very clear. It shows that those on the left, the innovators, are the ones that are having the most impact. They're seeing measurable results, and they're really setting their shows up for future success.
I'll add an on-the-fly observation that the 27% of you that are left at the end of the day for our presentation must be innovators. You can remind your colleagues the next time you see them that when they complain about exhibitors that pack up and roll out, just saying, just saying.
I know, that's good. Well, those of you who are here who have experienced the whole day, that was a good on-the-fly observation. You're going to be going back to the office tomorrow or Friday, for those of you who are participating in Legislative Advocacy Day, with new tools and new inspiration to think and act like an innovator. We're better equipped with all we've heard today. And on that note, you know, we have heard from some really amazing speakers about how they're showing up for their audiences in new ways, things that they're trying, that they're experimenting with, that they are doing to innovate. And Ken and I, knowing that we were going to have this conversation with you today, we've been taking notes. So we've been listening for those sparks, those moments of inspiration, the aha things where we're like, that's what it thinks, or that's what it looks like to think and act like an innovator. So we thought we'd share some of those moments with you now. And do you want to start?
Yeah, so no pressure. We had to listen all day to do this. In working with Sam on his 5 data points for the last several years, we thought it would be fascinating to kind of summarize for you. And there's some things in the app that do this as well that we've provided. But just some things that stood out to us, and we'll just kind of banter a little bit. Starting with Gary, I think the quote, "Change drives our business. We will build our whole model on launching new products, new research, new services, and new connections." I thought that's an innovative mindset. That's a thing we have to be moving forward on. Continuously reinventing yourselves. My favorite, because it's quintessential Gary, be paranoid all of the time. I think that's something we could all learn from. And I think that the statement that competition makes all of us better, it was reiterated later in the day in the conversation around if you didn't come back from COVID better than you started, you didn't do it right. And I think that really is a strong thing for us to understand. So not just competition makes us better, but so does adversity if we respond to it and we respond with resilience.
My takeaway from Gary was similar, just that you reminded us that our events are reflections of the changes that are happening in the spaces that we operate in and can be catalysts for that change. So if our events themselves aren't changing, then we're missing opportunities and we're not really showing up as a reflection of the innovation that's around us.
I can't leave Sam out because Sam then followed up with our introductions around the room, and Sam was innovative in making all of you stop saying good morning. And I did the math. We saved almost 7 minutes, so congratulate yourselves and take that away. If any of you ever do introductions, make those instructions clear. It works, and it's innovative. But going on to Jeannie and Julie, I think the conversations that we are having with them, obviously a lot of tactical pieces of that, but understanding that cost issues lead to business model challenges, which lead to innovation and/or disruption opportunities. And so I think that's a good piece. And the piece that stood out to me the most that Julie talked about and then Jeannie reiterated was constantly asking the question, why? If you've followed me for any length of time, you know that the little gimmick I love to do is if I ask boomers in the room, and Gen X, you can play along because we don't matter. There's literally a story in the New York Times yesterday morning that said Gen X, the generation that no one cares about and there are no research reports for us to share. That was the title. And so if I ask boomers, I want you to jump, you say, and I want the rest of the room, the millennials, and if there are any Gen Z in the room, you can shout along, or Gen X, you can just pretend. I ask you to jump, you say what? Thank you. Every time it works. This conversation about why, I think, really begins to drive innovation cycles that we should be paying attention to.
Yeah, and for me, Julie and Jeannie just reiterated the importance of staying focused on the needs and wants of our audiences, including exhibitors, and understanding their planning cycle, the timing of it, and the total cost of ownership.
Moving on to India, she shared such great information around return on value. I think I counted up the number of ROs today, and there was enough to filter all of the water in the building. That's a geek joke.
Okay.
Sorry. The return on value ecosystem was I thought that just being transparent, talking about the measurable results, because if we're not measuring, we're not moving. And so I think that's a great opportunity. And then she had a statement at the end that I just pulled right from the slide that I thought was really great. Value is no longer a promise, it's a deliverable. And I think that's a really powerful statement.
Love it. I love the suggestion of building in structured discovery processes to enhance value alignment and deeper relationships. And I also noticed a theme with Julie and Janine and India about collaboration internally with other departments and externally with vendors, partners, organizers, et cetera.
Kimberly knows it's dangerous to come on the stage with me, but playing the role of conventionalist, would you show the audience your tablet? Not that.
Oh, my notes
that tablet.
from today?
I used voice to text to go with my notes for today, but that's fine.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Now I'm just picking. I think you had a couple insights with that Dr. Farmer shared.
So I love just the question, how do we impress people who have seen it all? And I know that most of our attendees aren't heads of states and captains of industry, except maybe yours, Gary, but that attend Davos. I feel like our challenge, the innovators in the room will think, how can we lean into the challenge of giving our audiences the same kind of memorable attendee experience that Davos gives theirs?
Last but certainly not least, kind of wrapping it up with our headwinds panel, if we were doing a drinking game on the word uncertainty today, we would all be under the table. So It apparently is the new state of normal. So we'll just stick that out there. Staying on top of current data, I thought Kevin made a good point that I made the mistake yesterday of calling it a myth. It's really more lore. There are things that we see ricochet around the industry that happened once or a couple of times, and they become the data. And we have to be really careful to not let the lore sneak in. We're really paying attention to the data and the current data. Make sure you're looking at sourcing, looking at authorship, looking at margin of error, and most importantly, a little date stamp on there that tells you when that data came from. I think it'll be helpful. But looking for opportunity among uncertainty can be uncomfortable. There was a conversation about resilience. We always want to remind people of what we learned during the pandemic. The headwinds we're facing right now are not that. We are in a state of obviously uncertainty, take a drink, and the opportunity for us is to take what we learned from the pandemic, but not go back to it. We are not in that state. The light switch is not off. We have opportunity, and there's pockets of great opportunity. My favorite insight of that whole panel, though, is that Rich Scarfo is apparently, we're going to go to his events, and he's going to feed us all.
Right. So my standout moments from that were from Rich as well. So I liked hearing how he went to market specifically with a different model with Health and Vive in particular, and looking for creative, cost-effective ways to help sponsors and exhibitors engage, like the booth packages he talked about, the meetings programs, and even, I know this is a little different than cost-effective engagement, but I thought the idea of the bespoke dinners in the different regions were really cool too.
Lastly, I'll just wrap up a couple of common themes that we heard and maybe give a little bit of color on that, not that I wouldn't anyway. Just a common theme, obviously, embracing and optimizing change. I told a group yesterday that in our industry, we are external optimists and internal pessimists. That seems to be the role that we take. And so picking up and optimizing change, embracing that, I think is important. Disrupt or be disrupted would be a theme from today that I would pull out of it, and then I would add a quote that I've heard and modified myself. Data and creativity without implementation, insights, and accountability can be malpractice. So taking that information, that opportunity, and that execution forward. And then lastly, it's a thing I'm trying to get to catch on, so I'll use it here, which is, we talked a lot about personalization today, and I think we have to recognize that we as an industry have moved from a conversation around B2B, which was expanding the brand, B2C, which is amplifying the brand, and we're now in B2Me. The conversation around personalization is on our doorstep. It's an opportunity for us, and as we embrace the disruption and uncertainty, I encourage you to look at ways that we can B2Me our interactions with attendees and our exhibitors.
As much crap as you give me, I have to admit I really like that. So the B2Me thing.
Can't help it,
I'm the nice one on the stage.
I'm almost like I'm innovative.
Well, we are not done hearing from innovators just yet. So we are lucky enough to have two event organizers who really are walking the walk of innovation join us today. They're going to share their stories with us, and I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, but please join me in welcoming to the stage Nicole Hollida and Tom Gattuso. And I have a feeling Ken's going to be nicer to you guys. So, Nicole, why don't you start by introducing yourself, tell the audience, I think probably a lot of people have heard about ConExpo, ConAg, but tell them about AEM, what you do, and the other events that you organize as well.
Thanks, Kimberly. Nicole Hollida, I'm the Senior Vice President of Exhibitions and Marketing for the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. We're a trade organization for off-highway heavy equipment in construction, agriculture, forestry, mining, and the utility industry. As Kimberly said, ConExpo, ConAg, it's our largest show. With about 2.9 million net square feet and about 140,000 attendees. We do produce 4 events in the space, so our total portfolio would be about 4.6 million square feet with over 170,000 attendees.
Awesome. Tom?
So I'm Tom Gattuso. I am the Vice President of Events at SEMA.
I'm really fortunate that I've now been in the events industry for 30 years. They've all been in the automotive sector. Started doing consumer shows, new car shows, and evolved into doing some off-road events on the consumer side. And it was sort of right place, right time for me at SEMA 14 years ago, because I had started events in new cities. I had built exhibit space in areas that convention centers said exhibit space couldn't go. And there's two doors, one at the San Jose Convention Center and one at the Ontario Convention Center, that I might as well put my name on, because now they fit vehicles and it made ballrooms accessible to cars. So it's that type of stuff that's kind of followed me my career. But now I'm at SEMA. It's a 58-year-old event. We're probably 1.2 million net square feet, and we don't count the outside, which is probably another 750,000. But it's a dynamic event that really catches the emotion and really captures our industry.
Cool. So one of the things that Ken spoke about, the data that helps differentiate an innovator from a conventionalist is how much a show changes from year to year. So maybe tell us a little bit about either how much SEMA changes from year to year, or sort of your process of initiating that change.
So we're a little bit old school, where we start literally from a maxed out 10 by 10 floor plan. And we do our seniority based on a point per year. So for the most part, we redo our show completely. But as we're going through that process, we're also looking at traffic patterns and really what the market needs are. My role is really to make sure that we're mirroring the marketplace. So are EVs popular right now? Is synthetic fuel popular? What are the things that are popular? What can we feature in a future tech area, which we've got, or our new product showcase? And where do those two things go? So that's, for us, something that we revisit on a yearly basis, but we're working a couple years out. So as we're going through the show with some of the ideas, what we're hoping for next year, we're really starting from scratch, for lack of a better term, and sort of building it on the fly. So today marks 160 days, and I don't really keep track of how we are to the show. And we're going to have a music concert on Friday, the 7th of November, which is 163 days away, and we don't have our third band picked yet. So, so it's stuff like that where there's this synergy that can happen and serendipity that can happen in the last minute. So we're planning all the time, and we're planners, but at the same time, you let some of it be fluid. And that, I think, is where some of the magic happens.
I think I heard you one time talking about the concept of Sally, like that. Do you know what I'm talking about, that story? Will you share that briefly?
Yeah, so I kind of lived in my own little microcosm at a small company that did new car shows. And I would write on a notebook, and I'm a pen and paper person. I've always got a Waterman pen somewhere on my body.
Thank you, Tom, for supporting me.
But I had written at the top of a notebook, S-A-L-Y. And in my brain, it was like, Sally. Like, let's not do Sally. I don't like Sally. And that was just like my own little quirk. And then I presented that at one of our vendor summits, and basically said, you know, when you come to us with ideas, one of my pet peeves is just rinse and repeating what we did last year. That's easy. And there's a scale of easy to hard, and in the middle is effort. And if you can find that balance, and I'll, you know, I always.
And does everybody know Sally?
Find that balance.
Same as last year.
So
they
Sally
all
is
know
same
Sally.
as last year.
They
Yeah,
really do
everybody
know Sally.
does.
Yeah.
What's that?
They all know Sally. They
Oh,
do not know.
They just
they
don't
know
know they know Sally.
Yeah.
Yeah, same as last year as Sally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a thing.
Yeah.
You try to avoid that, but at the same time, you do have some sacred cows. So do they evolve, and what can you do to keep your show fresh?
Okay, so Nicole, what role does Sally play in event planning for ConExpo ConAg? How much does your show change from year to year?
I try to think about it in a percentage, and I can't come up with one, but I would echo what Tom said in terms of following the market. Being an association, I think we have a unique advantage in being able to keep our ear to the ground with, you know, our exhibitors who are in the manufacturing and component space. And so we track what's going on in their world from that perspective. But we do put a pretty big emphasis on voice of customer from the attendee, which would be the contractors. And our team will do remote focus groups, over Teams to ask a series of questions and make sure that our industry outlook for the exhibit side of the event is tracking with some of their biggest challenges. And so, we take those two sides and we try and marry them together to come up with that win-win.
Awesome.
So I have to share something while we still have this topic. And Nicole, Tom, you said something a minute ago that you're still waiting on your last band for the last night. I want to share that backstage. Nicole actually said that with all of the uncertainty that we've talked about today, she had a song she wanted to share with us. It was from a Broadway musical, I think.
The sun will come out tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right.
She sang it for me back there. So you if you're
but
looking
I will
for
not
something-
be singing it here.
I need the sun to come out right now because I'm second guessing whether I go to Metallica tonight.
Yeah,
because
optimism.
My seat is
Optimism.
Not under
Yeah.
shade.
Are you going to Metallica tonight? Maybe?
It could be a wet situation, so we're still working through that.
I think
yeah.
you said you were going to give everyone tickets.
You may have misheard that.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so to keep the banter going, Ken, you brought up this idea, you made a little joke about the last day of the show and the last hour of the conference or whatever. So I thought it could be fun to look at a challenge like the last day of the show. I think a lot of us have the issue where attendance drops off. It's not typically the best day of the show with the most energy. How do you solve that with an innovator mindset? So we can start with you this time, Nicole.
This came up for us. I'm sure you can appreciate it kind of ebbs and flows throughout your show cycles over the years, and it kind of came up for us again in terms of that energy. And so our exhibitors, our members were asking about it, and we did a deep study to understand the impact of changing the format and things like that. And that's another topic, but all were in alignment that the format should remain the same for a lot of reasons. And so they were like, yeah, but now what? And so I promised our exhibitor stakeholders, and Dana's over there, she'll get a kick out of it, an unprecedented level of effort to address the end of the show. And so we brought in all of our stakeholders, contractors who are not our members, so the people out working the field, our members who are the exhibitors. We brought in the city of Las Vegas, we brought in hotel people, and we, with the help of David Safe and his team from Freeman, we did a facilitated 2 days to look at the data that we had and then determine how could we really treat the back end of the show as something else. And so you can all appreciate, you've had these conversations, well, I can move Tuesday attendance to Friday. That's not what we wanted. We really wanted to add additional value to the back end of the show to help really leverage the investment that the exhibitors were making so they could get more return out of it. And we came up with really exciting programs for what we think are emerging markets for the show, and we're just putting those in on Friday and Saturday. And so we recognize it's in a pilot form. In order to have a psychological impact on a show of 140,000 people, you'd probably have to add 30,000 people. And I wouldn't say these programs are aiming for that, but we are looking for signal that we're in the right direction to determine if we should dial that up or down in future iterations. And so I think it's one of our most transformative efforts right now, and I think we're all really excited about it.
Same question to you, Tom.
Yeah, so the loudest sound on the face of the earth is the sound of a tape gun at noon at the final day of a trade show.
Yeah.
So in order to avoid that, I started at SEMA in 2011, and my timing was perfect because that was the first year that we organized the exit of vehicles from the show. And we now call that the SEMA Cruise, and you fast forward 14 years, and it gains us millions and millions of impressions on social media. But what we found was people were sticking around to be able to watch that parade of cars. But the parade didn't go anywhere, so we started to look at adding a consumer event to the end of that. And now we've further evolved that concept where now we've got a concert on Friday. We've got a consumer opportunity where people can come to the show. And really that's coming from wanting to spread the value to the full 31 hours of our show. But it's also this consumer event mindset that I have, where when someone buys a $10 ticket to an auto show and they show up at Sunday at 2 o'clock, they're looking for some value. And it's the same thing with a buyer that comes from somewhere and the only day they could get out of their shop was the final day. They don't want to look at a show that's not as full as it could be. So when we're starting to do some of these shoulder events, it really is us just pushing to make the 31 hours as perfect as we can do it. And if we get the benefit of having something that happens on Monday or happens after 4 o'clock on Friday, doing well and giving us benefit, that's just icing on the cake. So we don't really go out to do much other than bring as much value to the industry as we can, and then looking forward 10 and 15 years into the future and trying to predict what the marketplace is like, it now involves an end user enthusiast in our world. So, you know, we took our B2B event and said, what would it look like with an end user enthusiast in the mix? And in 10 years, how involved is that end user going to be in the marketplace and the stream of commerce? So, you know, depending on that bet, we're sort of morphing our show to be ready for anything by 2033, 2034.
So I remember, Tom, when you were having this conversation, you're going to festivalize and the various things that we talked about, there was a concern that I'd like you to share kind of the results of, which was, will our exhibitors be okay with these consumers coming in? And probably many in this room, that's the conversation when it comes to bringing consumers to an event. It doesn't always work, but in your situation, tell me about how that transpired, because there was concern, right? What happened?
There was definite concern because we had 40-40-20. 40% wanted consumers, 40% did not, and 20 couldn't decide. So we sort of rolled the dice and let some in on a very small level. It was somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 people the first year. And I made sure to put them in sort of a neon purple badge so that you could not miss these people that were not B2B. And it was only one day, and we really didn't market it that well intentionally because we just wanted to do this pilot case. And we started to go into some of our exit polling of our exhibitors, and we were talking about lead retrieval and value for the show. And they said, you know, everything worked great except those purple badge people. They wouldn't go in the scanner. And we said, well, those were our end user enthusiasts, you know, and it was pretty clear that everybody was divided. And they said, oh no, we've got marketing teams that can market to enthusiasts. So we wanted those people. So we now go, and when we talk about easy versus hard and effort in the middle, we now go to a pretty extreme circumstance to be able to sell tickets on a traditional ticket selling site and have our lead retrieval on a traditional trade show site and do some APIs in the middle so that we can transfer this data so that someone on the trade show floor can scan the badge of a consumer and be able to market to them differently. And again, I think that's morphing of the marketplace that's happening.
Yeah. Risk
and
paid
just
off.
really being ready for it.
Great.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, because we've heard from leaders of some pretty sexy shows today, CES and Davos, and I would argue SEMA falls in that category too. What would you say, like, is the advice that you're giving today applicable to those in the audiences who have small shows, whose subject matter area they cover isn't quite as sexy? Like, how does, because some of these things that you're doing sound like really awesome, but could you do this at a small medical meeting? Like, what would you say to them?
So I'd say yes, you can definitely do that because you really are just trying to hone into the needs of your marketplace. What is it that they're looking for? And then you have to establish a vision and be confident in that vision of this environment that you want to create so that they can connect. I like to call it the warm hug. Like if you go to a show and you see some of the signage, if it's industry applicable, they don't understand why they like it. They just know that they found their home. And I like to look at our event as an industry homecoming. So one of the things we do along that vein, which doesn't take a lot of ingenuity, is all of our signage features art from an automotive industry artist. And we pick a new artist every 3 years to be able to help keep some costs down and that type of thing. But we literally have multiple artists over the last, we started this in 2013, where they're stealing kick panels from our information and registration counters because it features art from Chip Foose or El Til Rock or whoever it is. So it's one of those things where people will come to the show and they're like, yeah, you know, I noticed all the really cool art. who was that person or whatever that is. So this year, we haven't announced it quite yet, but this year,
Just did.
one of our main influencers, I haven't announced the guy yet.
Oh, okay.
But one of our main influencers was a photographer named Larry Chen. And this year he's going to be, and for the next 3 years, he'll be our industry artist. So really what it is it's us being able to evolve this vision of what the show is. Like, so we gave him a task and we said, what is racing performance? What is hot rod? What is restoration? What do those mean to you in a piece of art? And he's a younger person who's got a much more exposure in some of the import tuner scene than, say, the 65 Mustang, 67 Camaro scene. So it's going to give our show just a little different slant, and it's going to allow people who come to the event to see that the industry's evolving, the show's evolving, they're evolving. So it's this really subtle thing that you can do. And again, it's this dichotomy of effort and easy to hard, effort in the middle. There's black and white, and there's gray. And trade shows and events really have a lot of operations people that love black and white. And black and white's super easy. There's a rule, you stand by it, and you don't let anybody do anything. And then there's gray, that's your marketing and your salespeople. In between is effort. So what can we do to make it really cool? Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what we focus on. That's why we change the artist, and that's why you have to have this vision and understand what your marketplace wants and give that warm hug to your industry because they're needing it.
I feel like you've just issued a challenge. Like, your branding success can be measured by how much of your signage gets stolen at the end of the
Yes.
show. Like, it's kind of cool. So Nicole, same question sort of. So you talked about ConExpo, ConAg, and some of the smaller events that you have. How does your approach to innovation change from a large event to the small events in your portfolio?
Our smallest event is about 230,000 square feet, and we really like to test and learn on the smaller events. We've launched a couple initiatives where, with a minimal viable product, just to understand if it can scale up or down. We feel that we have a lot more agility to try new things versus where we're locked into a larger event that can have its own challenges in that way. So we'll try something out and we'll learn from it, and then we'll, continue to make it better. We'll shine it up and get it ready for the big stage or prime time. And then you roll it out at ConExpo in a more polished way, and then it goes back around to another show and lives on. So.
Awesome. Sam, I have more questions, but I'm always so afraid of getting kicked off the stage by you. So I don't know, do you want us to open it up to everyone for questions? Okay, so if you guys have questions for Tom and Nicole, please ask them. We do have plenty of time for a few questions.
Yes, we do, and
okay.
I have a microphone that works, so I'm going to use it. Without naming names, without using numbers, maybe percentages, whatever, do both of you have an innovation budget? Do both of you have each year in your budget a certain line item for, let's try this? And the other question is, how do you inspire and reward your staff for coming up with crazy ass ideas?
I don't know that we have a line item per se, but as a team, I think we have trust in the bank, and that gives us permission to feel free to ask for things. And so when we went through not only this last day programming, but another idea that will be announced shortly that we're even more thrilled about, it was in excess of $2 million, which is a big spend for even a big show. And we took it to our board, and they were like, absolutely. But I think it also comes from being very metric driven and promising that our heart is in the right place for their return on the investment, and that we're always tracking, very metric driven. But the one thing that we've done to really push this along is in a reorg that I did in the department. We had reasons for doing that, but I was in the background the whole time saying, this is my moment where I'm going to take a VP level individual and move half of her work off her plate to now dedicate half her work to be VP of data and tech integration. And so I've been really trying to get the team to say, okay, well, how can AI do that? both for efficiency and effectiveness for all the stakeholders. And so Dana's here, that's half her job now. And so I think you could just take anyone on your team who shows an interest in that and give them some objectives and see where they run with it over a year time. Noting it's going to take time, but that's something that we've done recently.
And Sam, we don't have a specific line item, but one of our missions with our event is to make it the best show in our industry, and speaking of automotive, right? So I'm really not competing with another trade show. I'm really just competing with events that people go to from an automotive perspective. So we sort of have this rule where you sort of err on the side of cool. So when we're looking at signs, there may be one that looks cool, and there may be one that is very directional, and you'll be able to find the event that you're looking at. We're going to want to err on the side of cool and figure out how to make the sign work. So I wouldn't say that we're just adding on expenses as they go, but when we see something really cool, we figure out a way to make it happen.
Can I suggest that you sell that T-shirt? Because Err on the Side of Cool, signed by Tom Gattuso, would be amazing.
That will not be worth any money.
Maybe we'll have Chip Foose sign it instead.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Warwick has one up here.
Where? Oh.
Great panel, although I only saw half of it, but it sounded great. What competitive issues are you finding from AI from other, so your exhibitors who may be using AI and looking at all the alternatives from your shows with AI? What are you doing about that? Do you see that, and what are you doing about it?
So I can answer specific with my experience recently with AI. And again, I think it's healthy to have a consumer event mindset on some of the B2B events that we do. And when we were looking to market our music festival, we ran into some software where we could find lookalike audiences and use AI to predictably find people that would be interested in the bands. So we took that same mindset and we're working on doing that same technology where we can start to find lookalike audiences within our B2B community. So that's really my focus from an AI perspective on where we're finding audiences and being able to make connections. I think that for the most part, my show may be a little unique where 70% of our companies are smaller, 20 by 20 booths and smaller. So for the most part, they may not be sophisticated enough to go and do their own thing. So we're lucky in that respect.
I don't know if your question was how the exhibitors might use AI and how that might be a challenge for us, but I'm going to go with that. So the contractors still need to understand how AI would be of use to them. At the end of the day, they're about increased productivity and decreased downtime. And so if AI is the solution for that, they still need to learn about it. And so you're starting to see the content of the booth change, but they're still needing to connect, maybe more so now than ever, to help an industry that isn't a first adopter or an early adopter really understand the ROI behind it. And so, yeah, I think those floor plans may change in the future, but the need to connect and really get people to understand what the value is for our industry is pretty still critical.
Okay. I'm going to put Tom on the spot with the last question.
Awesome.
I think that every year you reach into your own association's pocket and invite all of your suppliers, all your contractors to a couple of day kind of a fun retreat where food's included and you hang out and pick their brains and plan for next year. Could you talk about that a little bit?
We do. So it's an event that we call Camp SEMA. It originated in 2014 where for more than 30 years, Convex produced the SEMA show and was the show management company. And they're a phenomenal group and they did a phenomenal job. And Chuck Schwartz and Susan and Jeff Pressman and that whole team there really did a great job. And we took this opportunity to bring operation and sales in-house. So they hired me in 2011, had me figure out what was going on, and then were crazy enough to let me build a team. And my one goal really was to make sure that the industry didn't notice that show management changed. But when we really got down to brass tacks, we didn't know all of our vendors. So we said, how do you get to know someone? Well, cooking s'mores over a campfire would be one way to do that. So we said, okay, let's go camping. And we started this event, and we did this little fake glamping, and really just shared our vision of our association, the vision of our show, and our desire to be innovative, and our desire to be the best show that anyone in the automotive industry has ever been to. So that just sort of created this spark that we've just kept on as a tradition. And it's just this meeting of ideas, and things come out of it that are incredible, where we had every vendor had their own sort of ESM and order form. It was like, let's put them all in one place. We're only going to market one thing. And we just roll stuff like that out, and you just have this great line of communication open, and it really streamlines things quite a bit.
Awesome. Well, I think it's clear we picked two wonderful innovators to share their stories. So thank you so much for being here, and please join me in thanking them.